It is time, and we have also found a problem. Ms. N. Zhang. Albert Chen mentioned about the incinerator at Lofu Hang in Guangdong province. A dozen of years ago, both Guangdong and Hong Kong talked about building incinerator. Now for the facility at Lofu Hang, they have already completed the first as well as the second stages. We are still talking about it. For the incinerator at Lofu Hang, they are dealing with thousands of tons of waste every day. Now, a decade ago, it cost us $1 billion. Now it will cost us more than $10 billion. Well, we haven't got the secretary. Well, I really hope that for those members who have disagreement with the Bureau to have a word with the secretary. We badly need an incinerator. We just can't survive without the incinerator. Have you finished? Yes. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, sorry, Albert Ho, 3 minutes. Well, for the questions asked, it appears that after asking the questions, we received a lot of feedback. Say, for example, for the incinerator cost, a lot of feedback is telling us that they are very dissatisfied with the picture, like the operation, the construction costs, etc. A lot more information is flowing in. Probably we need to ask questions in writing. And then for the emission, we need more information for the sake of comparison. Mr. Chen did ask why our emission standards are worse than others. It isn't just a matter of comparison with Lofu Hang incinerator. I think more should be and could have been done to further suppress the emission levels. So, in response to the questions that we asked, a lot more queries have been raised. So I think it's high time for us to put in questions in writing. When we are given just 2 minutes, I think probably I have to make full use of all the 2 minutes allotted to me simply to put my question. The same is true for the management of the landfills. Therefore, I really hope that more time will be given to us. I think being more cautious is better. Even if one day you get the approval, I hope we can have a cost-effective facility. It appears to me that all the projects that we have embarked on have become more costly than others. Like in the case of the express rail, when I go out, the public are still blaming me, thinking that I have given approval as well. So we have to be mindful about being cost-effective, and please give us the comparative data. Therefore, I support that more time should be given to us to further consider the matter. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Zhang wondered why others have completed the construction of their incinerator while we are still marking time. Seems that we're wasting time. Now let me explain. The matter before us is very controversial because we all want to be very cautious whether we should have it and the scale. This is because there's no going back once it is built. And then if we build such a facility, does it mean that we will be spoiled and then we'll just allow more waste to be generated, thinking that it can be burnt? Perhaps we should think more in terms of recovery and recycling. Please don't rely on landfilling and incineration. In addition, we just wonder whether the construction cost should be that high. We need more monitoring. Therefore, we want to ask ourselves this question. We should not be wasting so much resources. I think it's time for us to revisit the topic, and we should do a better job about reduction of waste at source, which is the same as recycling and recovery. In Hong Kong, perhaps we shouldn't criticize the government too much for the time being. For the past decade or so, we have started a lot of initiatives for the purpose of recycling. You see old men, old ladies picking up the scrap and waste paper, and that would go into the recycling stream. There are also certain areas in which we haven't performed well. Has the government used a lot of recycled paper? Not much. We just landfill our waste and try to burn our waste, but we don't try to think of other sources. I think we should look at the direction. We should enhance the awareness of our people to protect the environment. We shouldn't allow ourselves to generate so much waste. When we buy electronic gadgets, in fact, we may not need the gadget. So by buying them, we are causing a lot of wastage. Now it seems that we just turn a blind eye to the crux of the matter. We simply try to get an extension of landfills, and we try to build an incinerator so as to resolve the problem. Mr. Stephen Ho, I speak in opposition to the motion. A lot of items have been sort of deferred. We still have dozens of items on the agenda. This is the backlog. Now, a lot of people would shirk the responsibility, saying that the government is not willing to reshuffle the items. You may also have a lot of excuses to defer the approval, claiming that you just want to improve the policy. But then what you are doing is simply to defer the discussion and try to defer it till next week. But I don't think by doing so you can make the government reshuffle the agenda item sequence. When we encounter an obstacle, when we encounter a barrier, we should try to overcome it and step across it. You should also have a meeting with officials outside of this forum, and then clarify the picture, and then vote on the matter. I don't think we should drag our feet because this is not going to resolve the problem. This is not compatible with the Hong Kong spirit. Now, I'm very concerned about one particular item, and it is the 15th item of the agenda. Since the ban on trawling, many fishermen find it difficult to get sufficient loans. They are anticipating this particular loan scheme, and then a lot of people have already prepared plans to construct a fishing vessel, and they may run the risk of having to have their deposits forfeited. There are many similar items. It will be difficult for us to differentiate between livelihood issues and non-livelihood issues. All the items on the agenda are important. So just want to advise members who are trying to filibuster using different methods. stop it. Otherwise, the citizens would be further disappointed by the electrical, in particular for those who are going to vote for this motion.
Mr. Yip Kwok Him. Well, thank you, Chairman. After hearing from Mr. Leung Yew-jong, I can say that I don't blame you for wanting to clarify the matter, but it's not fair. About the problem of landfills and incinerators, even in Northern European countries, which are already doing a good job in protecting the environment, they still need incinerators. So you cannot argue that we should have other initiatives to protect the environment, and that's it. We don't need the incinerators. You can't force everyone to agree with you. If you drag on the matter like this, if you go along this line of argument, I think it is just a fallacy. And also, just now some members talked about putting priority to livelihood issues. But waste disposal is also one of the livelihood issues. Aren't we here to resolve livelihood problems? Are the issues that you think livelihood issues, should these issues be put to priorities first? And last time no more motions could be moved, so you resort to moving the motion to adjourn the meeting. But we have so many items waiting to be approved. Members of the public are waiting for the FC to approve funding for these items. Are you accountable to these people? And if you go on like this, I don't think you would get any support from voters in the upcoming election. Please reconsider. I don't know whether next time you're going to continue with such tactics. But if we have further motions to adjourn the debate, this to hamper the operation of the FC, then I express dismay. And if there are ambiguities, or if you want further elucidation from the administration on any item, that's normal. But you cannot resort to moving adjournment motions as a way of causing obstruction to the operation. Mr. Yu Si-wing, thank you, Chairman. We all understand that we should resolve the problem of waste disposal in Hong Kong. Ultimately, the government would be responsible, and ultimately the public would suffer. So on the 3 landfill extensions and 1 incinerator proposal, no matter the outcome of our discussion, members of the public would support it, electoral members would mostly support it, and the longer we drag on over this matter, the larger the cost we have to pay. We understand that the cost estimates would just go up. So I hope members would not move German motions each time we have a meeting. It's meaningless. We should move back on track. We should put concrete suggestions for the government to improve their policy so that we can do more for our environment and resolve the problem of waste disposal. So I'm against this motion to adjourn the meeting. Dr. Loy Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Originally, I didn't want to speak because by speaking I seem to be helping pan-democratic members in filibustering, but I really cannot bear with it any longer. Every time a member from the pan-democratic camp would move a motion to adjourn the discussion. Of course, this proposal is controversial, but waste disposal problem is imminent. This is not just a bare threat. We could be surrounded by waste one day. Recently, a member of the public asked me if this proposal is not passed, if we do not have waste disposal facilities, what should happen? Can we ship the waste to somewhere abroad? And I said, no, we must be responsible for waste disposal. Of course, we should work on promoting waste recovery and recycling. But like I said last week, this motion to adjourn the meeting is totally illogical. it's a waste of breath. Members of the public do not understand what we're doing. If you have questions for the Secretary, go ahead. Of course, you should not repeat those questions, but definitely there is no reason to adjourn the meeting. Chairman, it is an engineer's duty to find out solutions to problems in face of various constraints. And this is what we're facing now. We have different views, we have different limitations, but we still need to come up with the best series of strategies and management methods to deal with waste disposal. I won't spend all my 3 minutes, Chairman. Next, Mr. Tanka. First of all, I share the views of I went with Dr. Loy Kwok and other members to a duty visit in Transylvanian countries to look at incinerators, and we all agree that incinerators are indispensable as waste disposal facilities. I don't know why the Pan-Democrats are still insisting on asking questions. We need to deal with food waste. And in fact, all members receive this message. Would members please note that the Secretariat learned from the police that at 7 p.m. this evening there could be conflicts happening in Admiralty near this complex. So the Secretariat will arrange for staff members to go off duty at 6 p.m. Of course, I don't agree with the adjournment motion, but in face of reality, would the chairman please let us know whether we need to adjourn this meeting earlier than expected? I have not received this any notice to adjourn this meeting earlier, but if this is indeed the case, then we'll adjourn the meeting and leave early. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, it's up to us to decide whether to adjourn the meeting or not. But Mr. Albert Chan has proposed another motion to adjourn the meeting, and it's not for the sake of really adjourning the meeting. As before, such motions at the Finance Committee meeting didn't just target the landfills and incinerator proposal. It's actually targeting this administration. Be it a motion to adjourn the meeting or a quorum call, these are just tools for members to vent their spike. Just look at Mr. Albert Chan. Whenever he's not happy, he just raises his hand and asks the chairman for the meeting to be adjourned. They are in fact like playing games. Please do some soul searching. Ask yourself whether you're really doing good for the people of Hong Kong. So I hope members like Mr. Albert Chan could do some soul searching. Should you be abusing the FC procedures in such a manner to waste everybody's time and waste public taxpayers' money, Mr. Chan Kim Po? It's really a pity that every week we hear Pan-Democrats staging arguments on why they are opposing the proposal, and we reluctantly had to counter-argue. It's a waste of time. Well, go on with your non-cooperative campaign, but don't deceive the public about incinerator technology and the need for landfills. Well, I think we have a full understanding of that. We have had months of discussions. And Chairman, I think you should stand up for yourself. Don't be insulted by them. If they are really repeating themselves, you should make it clear. And please don't waste everybody's time and make it clear once again. If you're really so mindful of livelihood issues in Hong Kong, please don't get in the way and don't make false arguments to hinder the operation of this meeting. Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Any response from the administration? Mr. Albert Chan, 1 minute. Chairman, well, I may be throwing tantrums, but even if I speak loudly, it doesn't mean that my argument doesn't hold water. For example, about air pollutants, emissions, well, I put forward the argument because there are justifications, and the administration was unable to answer why, with the same capacity of 3,000 tons, we emit much more. And Chairman, perhaps I should clarify my mistake. I actually cited some units wrongly. Carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, well, these are two different chemicals. And on the emission level, 1,447, that's for sulfur dioxide, not carbon dioxide. I wonder why nobody from the administration pointed it out. I now put this question to a vote. This committee now decides to adjourn the meeting. Would those in favor please raise their hands? Division is claimed. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
家係頭39條，一投票完咗嚟到撳鐘，投完呢個票先。現在開始。
Voting begins. Before I announce the voting results, would members please check your votes. Voting is closed. Results are displayed. Voting results: 18 for, 13 against. I declare the motion negatived.
第13輪范國威。
13th round, Mr. Gary Fan, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. A question for the administration. Some Tribunal residents have asked me to put this question about the handling capacity of construction waste of RTS, as in particular the one in Kowloon Bay after its closure. The one proposed in Hong Kong has yet to be built. So even on this occasion, the Changuano landfill will only be extended by some 10 hectares. There will be further extensions such that the Changuano landfill cannot be closed in time. Now, my question is, for the 14 years in which the refuse transfer station operated, why is it that the Hong Kong RTS proposed cannot be built in time, such that the construction waste cannot be disposed of at that RTS in time? As we understand, apart from the way the stations in outlying islands, it's the established practice that no construction waste will be accepted. Have you considered the commercial elements as far as the site in the airport is concerned, such that the RTS is not built? In fact, we have no intention of building an RTS in Hong Kong. I don't know whether you're referring to the transfer station for Phil Bank. The information I received is East Kowloon, Hong Kong RTS. We don't have such a plan. Well, Dr. Chen, don't speculate. Just answer his question. If, according to you, there is none in Hong Kong, just say so. Next, Mrs. Regina Yip. First round, 4 minutes. Chairman, I don't wish to ask about the 3 landfills and 1 incinerator proposal. I'm asking about the matter of safety. The Secretariat has issued a notice for their staff members to leave at 6. What happens to us because of the possible conflicts? Well, you were not here. I was here. Just now the Secretariat asked whether we are going to adjourn the meeting earlier. And I said, and in fact, they're just advising staff members who should be knocking off at 6 not to stay behind afterwards. Do you have any other questions? No? Next, Mr. La Wong Fat, first round. 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I need to declare interest, first of all. I am one of the landowners and also a village representative in Long Kwu Tan village, and also chairman of Tuen Mun District Council near the northwest NT landfill. Over the years, in recent years, the administration has decided to build a heavily polluting facility in Tuen Mun.
Tuen Mun residents have been bearing the interest of the entire community in mind, and they are willing to sacrifice for many years. But then our sacrifice, there is a limit to our sacrifice. There has been great controversy surrounding the expansion of the Went landfill. 1 year ago, the CE openly said that the government is doing wrong to Tuen Mun, and he said that he will review the situation. Now, before the summer vacation last year, the electrical adjourned the debate on the funding for the consultant for that project, the government has actually gone down to the district to consult and follow up. And on issues like management of the facility and a number of proposals to improvement have been submitted or put forward. We are most worried about the size of the expansion, but then the government has not made specific promises, and the Tuen Mun residents do not see the government giving them good compensation in exchange. Mr. Wong Kim Sang said that the study would look into whether it's feasible to have phased expansion of the landfill, and once that study has been completed, the government will be discussing the proposals with the Tuen Mun District Council and the EAP of the electrical, and also the YNB and other relevant bureaus. On the 11th of this year, met with district councillors of Tuen Mun from political factions. And during that meeting, the government officials had undertaken to improve the traffic situation in Tuen Mun and build the cycling track between Tuen Mun and Tuen Mun, and also offers concessions in terms of waste charging for residents in Tuen Mun. Chairman, after considering the interest of Tuen Mun residents and the entire community in Hong Kong, I think the government should take more time to consider compensatory measures for Tuen Mun. I don't object to commissioning a consultancy study on the Went landfill project. But I must say that I don't object to the funding application for consultancy. That doesn't mean that I don't object to the project. After the consultancy report is completed, then I will consider the project as a whole and the compensatory measures for Tuen Mun residents before I decide on whether to support the project. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, sixth round, 2 minutes. Chairman, I note that the problem of construction waste landfilling is getting more serious. And the volume has increased drastically. And in the past decade, we've emphasized that to do good maintenance of good buildings, we've launched a number of measures in repair and maintenance of buildings. So has the government coordinated with other government departments and discussed the problem of rising volume of construction waste because of these various initiatives? Will the government consider sort of spreading the works over a longer period of time to try to mitigate the problem? And also, would arrangements be put in place so that construction waste, less construction waste should be taken to the landfills and the construction waste can be reused? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. I think this question has been raised in the last 2 meetings, and I think the details can be discussed at the relevant panel. Now, put simply, 90% of the construction waste is being reused. Well, that's a good level compared to world standards. We would still work hard, and we would work with the Development Bureau to conduct a review on the internal guidelines on green buildings. We would issue instructions to public works projects on how to further reduce construction waste. We are also discussing with the trade on how to raise the construction waste disposal fees. Ms. Emily Lau, 13th round, 2 minutes. Mr. Chairman, you were shaking your head when I was speaking, or the Secretary was shaking his head, and he didn't give us a timetable. He just said that he's doing consultation. Now, one point is about MSW charging. I don't know what is happening on that front. You said you have a blueprint, and by 2020, there will be a 40% reduction in MSW. But if you don't give us the details of the plan, how can you instill confidence into the public that you are going all out to reduce waste at source? Thank you, Ms. Lau, for your question. If you look carefully at the 10-year blueprint for waste reduction, we do have a clear objectives and timetable. Please look carefully at the blueprint. There are 3 stages. The first stage is most important. That's about charging on MSW. Well, when you look at experience worldwide, this is also a priority. Now, the Council for Sustainable Development will hold a meeting next Monday to discuss the finalized recommendations for the administration. And we have an interdepartmental group within the government to work hand in hand with the Council. And our aim is that in the first half of next year, there will be specific proposals presented to the relevant committees for discussion. And this is what we are doing. And then there will also be other initiatives with good timetable. Well, we will have elections in 2016. We will present the proposals in 2015. Well, it's not that we can vote on the proposals right away when they are presented in 2015. Well, will it be possible for this term of the Legislative Council to pass all these proposals, or shall we wait for the next term? We want to do it as soon as possible. Dr. Kenneth Chan, 4th round, 3 minutes. In the last round, I raised the question about compensation to fishermen. I know that there will be a one-off payment of $62.8 million or $6.28 million. And then there will be another amount related to land, or a resumption of land. And when we scrutinize such funding applications, we must be careful, or else we'll be having another problem like that pointed out by the number 63 report of the Director of Audit. So we should be very careful in terms of vetting funding proposals. We have to make sure that there is value for money. Now, 31 hectares of land will be affected because of the Shakucha reclamation, and 31 hectares of water body will be affected in terms of the habitat for porpoise. Well, for the Chun Moon reclamation, is there no problem for the fishing grounds, and also to the habitats of porpoise? There will not be any loss of water body. Is that the case? And does it mean that because of this, there is no need to make compensation to fishermen or mariculturists? The Secretary just said then there will be no need for sort of compensation. At the panel meeting, I also raised the same worries. At Shakuchao, we have to have reclamation, and if we are to do reclamation and incinerator in Zhangzhou, in Tunmun, then the problem may not be that great. So can the Secretary confirm that if the incinerator is built in Tunmun, the problem will not be so great? because of historical reasons. There is just one location, Shakuchao, for building incinerator. The other locations are non-starters. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 7th round, 2 minutes. The Secretary said that there are two types of construction waste, one from major works projects. 90% of them are recycled and reused. And the other category is that there is construction waste coming from demolition of illegal structures and those coming from the mandatory window and inspection programs. So these kind of construction waste comes from renovation and maintenance projects. So all these construction waste will go to Changguanao Landfill. So Secretary, based on the initiatives announced by the government on renovation, can you tell us the amount of construction waste that will be coming out of such initiatives? Can you talk further with the policy bureaus to give further guidelines on the contractors in terms of disposing or treating construction waste generated, so that the construction waste will not go to landfills? Now, for construction waste, the government is talking with the buildings department and also housing authority, which have a lot of such projects going on. Now, if there is a selective demolition, well, then there are guidelines governing that. Now, the Secretary said that when we review the construction waste charging scheme, we will further enhance our communication with the relevant departments. 5th round, Dr. Kenneth Chan, 2 minutes. Chairman, perhaps I may sound very long-winded, but then I think that I need to set out all the facts so that it's clear to everyone on why we object the building of the incinerator at Shakuchao and not Tuen Mun in Zhangzhou. Well, comparing the two places, if the incinerator is built in Tuen Mun, then there will be no loss of fishing grounds and water bodies and habitats for fitness purpose and so on. So the Tuen Mun location, it seems, is much better than Shakuchao. Perhaps the Secretary didn't have enough time to answer my question. He just quoted historical reasons, and it gave us the impression that Secretary, you are very overbearing in your policy. You are just making decisions out of political considerations and not objective facts, and not considering environmental protection and marine ecology and so on and so forth. Secretary, we have looked at the objective facts. This term of government has to deal with the issues taking into consideration historical factors. Now, objectively speaking, there is only one location which has been granted the environmental permit, and that is Shakuchao. Please understand this. Now, having said that, and through EIA, we try to minimize the impact caused by the Shakuchao incinerator. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 8th round, 2 minutes. Dr. Chen said that she would discuss with the relevant departments on how to better manage the disposal of construction waste. Do you have a concrete timetable on when you will discuss with these government departments, and when will proposals be presented so that the management of construction waste disposal is more effective? We are talking about two things here. Your response is just on the construction waste generated by major works projects. For example, demolition of buildings by HA and building of highways by Highways Department. But then I'm referring to small-scale projects like removing UBWs on rooftops and building and repair works of buildings and so on. So have you plans to make sure that the trade can effectively sort out and separate the construction waste generated so that not all of them have to be landfilled? For example, non-degradable materials, just non-degradable materials should go to landfills. Dr. Chen, for small-scale projects, during the demolition work, the metals retrieved and the wood will be recycled. Well, it depends on whether there is sufficient space for them to do this sort of sorting. But then if they don't have the space, they can take these materials to government sorting facilities to do that. When we talk to the trade, then perhaps we can drive harder home the message that they can do more recycling. For example, metal window frames should not be landfilled. Ms. Emily Lau, 2 minutes. The administration said that there is a $1 billion recycling fund. How does it operate? How can it make sure that there is really recycling and that the materials collected by the recyclers will not be deposited or disposed at the landfills? If members agree, then we would seek funding from the Finance Committee on the $1 billion recycling fund. The trade welcomes this fund. There are two parts. Now, if this is going to help the trade, then that would be in the form of a matching fund, $1 to $1, to help them do recycling work. For example, it can be spent on machinery and so on and so forth. So proposals should come from the trade. And at the same time, we would be supporting the academics and research institutions to upgrade the level of recycling. So that would be on a full funding basis. The trade supports our proposals, but we hope that the FC can give us the approval for the funding as soon as it can. When will the funding application be submitted to the panel and the FC? Well, we have already get it passed through the panel, and we are now putting it on the waiting list of the agenda of FC. I think we can support that kind of proposal. I think we should deal with these first before we deal with the funding applications for endpoint facilities. Well, we would rather like to proceed with measures relating to reduction at source and then the endpoint measures. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 2 minutes. Dr. Chen mentioned about construction waste from small works. Can she confirm that actually the construction waste from such projects can be taken to the government sorting facilities? Well, if that is the case, then they will not have to take the waste to the landfills, and then that helps drive down costs, and then they will be incentivized to use the government sorting facilities. Well, I think we should publicize this. Now, what I know is that normally the collectives just dump everything into the landfills. Well, if Dr. Chen can confirm that this is approach, then the sorting facilities can be used by the small-scale contractors as well.
Dr. Chen, well, if there is scrap metal, it can fetch a value. Usually, even when it is kept in the skip, then usually the recyclers would have already retrieved it. For other materials not having a high value, I think they can be sorted out so that those meant for the landfill will go to the landfill, and then for the inert materials, they will go to the fuel bank. Mr. Chairman, if I may follow this up, I want to know if you have a policy, assuming that things collected in the skip will go to the landfill and they're subject to a charge. By going through the sorting, then there will be a lower fee. So by having sorting, it means that the landfill charges can be reduced. Yes, it is $100 per ton. So there is an incentive. In other words, you pay $25 less by sorting before going to the landfill. KK Phone, there will be an air quality monitoring station at Chang Kwan O. It shows that the administration takes the matter seriously, and it also shows that the air quality will also affect the human health. Now, I want to know about the following matter. The nearest residence is Lohas Park. Of course, the SEN hasn't elaborated on this, but I wonder if you can have another monitoring station at Lohas Park, and then you can have if you only have an average figure, you may think that there isn't a problem, so you need to have a monitoring station nearer. If you don't have one at Lohas Park, then you can't get the true picture, because the average figure may not point to a problem. Dr. Chen, I know that it will be at the stadium of Chang Kwan O, and it has got the support of the Cyclone District Council after discussion. End of next year, we'll see the completion of the construction of the air quality monitoring station. As to whether we can have it at Lohas Park as well, when our colleagues consider the location of air quality monitoring station, we don't just look at the impact on a particular housing development. We will take a larger area into consideration. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've already said that the average figure for the entire district may not point to a serious problem. But then for the sensitive receiver, which is closer, I think you need to have a monitoring station. I think the landfill site itself has also got some monitoring stations, so it's better for us to monitor at source. Gary Fan, second 2 minutes, 13th round. What about the price difference between cent and net? Why is there such a difference? For cent, one will cost us $2.016 billion, the other $1.7 billion. In other words, both would cost more than $100 million. I want to know why there is such a price difference. The administration has said that for cent in future you will only receive construction waste. Is that the cause, or is it owing to the particular geographical position? Well, it doesn't depend on the area. Rather, it depends on the cubic meters involved. That is the volume. For cent, it is $247 per cubic meter, while the other one is $225 per cubic meter. Fernando Zhang, 2 minutes. For construction waste, of course, we are told that the recovery rate is 94%. But then for construction waste recovered, it is regarded as an inert material. In fact, it will go to the public fuel bank. For the Chang Kwan O landfill, I think right next to it there is a public fuel bank. So every day, for the inert construction waste, it will be transported along Landfill Road so as to reach the fill bank. Now for the landfill, you have told us that you will reduce the number of vehicle trips going to the landfill. But what about the number of vehicle trips visiting the fill bank? Will it decrease? And then according to your figures, we have got 20.2 million tons of waste. 94% will go to the fill bank. So I want to know about the percentage or the absolute figure about the amount of construction waste going to the fill bank. I've got the figures for 2013. Maybe I can share the figures with you. For year 2013, at the landfill, construction waste received on a daily basis more or less 3,600 tons. Going to the fill bank, 35,500 tons. In other words, those getting landfilled accounted for 9.2%. I think you would like to know whether there will be an increase or a decrease in the number of vehicle trips. Do you have the figures? For vehicles going to the fill bank, they will also make use of Landfill Road. We answered a similar question. On a daily basis, we have got 1,300 to 1,400 trips a day. Next, Wu Chi-wai, 10th time, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I want to ask a question about the incinerator. I asked this before, and then the Sen last time told us that it is going to be a modern facility. So the incinerator is not going to separate the waste before incinerating. We know that sometimes, in some cases, there may be an explosion owing to the nature or the type of the materials. Now, when we have hot pot, we have a gas canister, and that would also be abandoned. And then my question is, do you have a very simple screening mechanism? At least you would screen out the metal and other things that would be easily explosive, so as to make sure that such materials won't go into the incinerator, so as to safeguard their safety. Mr. R, as I've pointed out last time, for the waste to be collected, they will come from the refuse transfer stations. So unacceptable materials would have already been screened out at the stations, and then we'll be using containers to carry the waste. And then at the plant itself, we will avoid having non-permitted items to be incinerated, so they will be screened out. Another point is that the incinerator itself is robust and safe in terms of its design. Chair, my question was a screening mechanism. Will there be a screening mechanism? Do you have a mechanism to identify the waste in the container? Yes, we do open the container so as to understand what is inside. Albert Ho, back to Wu Chi-wai's question. For the general public, our greatest worry about incineration is that your initial screening may not be thorough. And what about plastics? Would that be permitted? If you burn the plastics, then we are afraid that there will be the emission of dioxin. So, can you not elaborate on this? Are you able to take out all the plastic? And then, what other materials would give rise to toxic gases when burnt? Now, in the past, we were told that at a high burning temperature, the dioxin level will be lowered. How can you be sure that the dioxin emission will be zero or at a very low level? And what about heavy metals?
就外國爐嚟講咧，係都呢啲爐咧都有燒呢啲膠。
In overseas countries, incinerators can also burn the plastics. We have got the modern technology that can break down the materials entirely. Moreover, the modern technology is such that we can deal with the dioxin and the heavy metals so that they will be sort of minimized. So this is feasible because it's European technology. According to what you said, there will almost be zero emission of dioxin and heavy metals, minimal, insignificant, because the Europeans or EU standards will be the most stringent one. We can't avoid having CO2, right? Will there be a lot of CO2? Well, in the case of CO2, well, it is a greenhouse gas. Yes, we do produce CO2 as a result, but then the incinerator is such that we can reduce the use of fossil fuel for power generation, and we can also lower the emission of greenhouse gases. In other words, in total, 440,000 tons of CO2 emission will be avoided.
我好快咁計計。
Fernando Zhang, I understand that for the trucks, usually the capacity is 24 tons, and then according to this calculation, we have got 35,500 tons of inert materials and then 3,600 tons of construction waste going to the landfill. So dividing it by 24, it means 1,629 trips. We are told about 1,300 to 1,400 trips a day. Does it mean that every day, they are overloading? If I may just explain a bit. Just now we were talking about the overall picture in Hong Kong. Currently, we have got 3 landfills receiving construction waste and then 2 fill banks. We don't transport by land alone. We have got the marine route and we are making greater use of it. So we have got barges at Kai Tak, and then we can reduce the number of vehicle trips. So the two are not directly proportional. So for the 35,500 tons of inert materials sent to the fill bank every day, I want to know how much will go to Chang Kwan O. Dr. Chen. Chang Kwan O. Please bear with me. I will give you the information later. Yes, please. Next, KK phone, the 15th time, 2 minutes. Let me supplement. At the district council level, the administration has said that the direction is to reduce the number of trucks going to the fill bank. Now, we have been given the figure of 100 such vehicles. Now, I have information from the CDD. In June 1320, August 1370, and then October 1410 vehicles. So it is going the other direction. So unless you're saying the CDD is wrong in the data, so otherwise how are you going to tally this set of figures? Dr. Chen. Now I've got the figures for Fernando Zhang. I'm KK Fong. You want the figures for the fill bank, right? You didn't listen to me. Dr. Chen, did you listen to me? You were just trying to answer Dr. Zhang's question. KK Fong, please put your question again. Can you give me more time? According to the department and the district council, it is said that we should try and we could reduce the number of vehicle trips in June in one direction. not counting the return trips, 1,320, August 1,370, October 1,410. So it's a rising trend. This is in opposition to the government's claim that the number of trips will go down. So please explain. Thank you, Mr. Feng, for your question. I think it is a range. They told us 13 to 1,400 trips. At the same time, they have tried hard and they have been successful in taking out 100 because of using the marine trip rather than the land route. But then the volume of waste generated differs from day to day. And in fact, we've been making greater use of the marine route. Next, Raymond Chen. 2 minutes, knife round. I'm Raymond Chen. I hope Dr. Chen can answer my question. During the break and also during the first meeting, I talked about the reduction of construction waste. You gave us a figure of a reduction of 80%. What is the base year of comparison? It has been said that the actual performance is even better than that figure. Can you back up with some figures, Dr. Chen? So you want to know about the waste reduction for public works? I haven't got the figure with me. I'll give it to you later. And then a question again on 2.0 landfill. Now, if it can be extended, then counting from 2017, there will be 6 more years that takes us to 2023. We try to see if it will be further extended. The Sen would not answer that question. Now, if you are really as successful as you have claimed in relation to the reduction of construction waste, are you going to set yourself a target? And then for 2.0, we give you the money. You say that you will only receive construction waste. But what about construction waste usually going to wind will also come to 2.0? Because if that is to happen, then it means that the number of vehicle trips will be greatly increased. The answer is no. Now, if the waste is generated in East New Territories or West New Territories, they won't come to 2.0. So for the construction waste going to 2.0, I think the volume will be more or less the same as of now. Now, if there is an increase across the board, then all the 3 landfills will receive more construction waste. Sid Ho, a question about construction waste. Last year, we went to South Korea, and we understand that they have got metal form work instead of timber as hoarding or for the form work. In the latter case, it would be very bad in terms of wasting resources. We've been told that maybe the administration would impose a condition in the public contracts to say that they have to use green materials. What about the private sector contracts? When you give approval to develop, why can't you impose this term as well? Yes, you have a lot of public works contracts, but what about private sector contracts? Why are you so afraid of imposing a mandatory measure, making sure that they will resort to green measures when they build their buildings? The same. I don't think all around the world we won't sort of find it a mainstream policy to impose a particular kind of material. You have to get BEAM Plus if you want to get the public works contracts. So using metal form work has become a mainstream practice, not just for the external wall. Even for staircases, they will have prefabricated units made in factories instead of on a construction site. And this way, they can cut down the construction waste. So we aren't that lagging behind South Korea.
Mr. Ho, well, Chairman, Other countries do not have the problems that we have. We have a small place and we generate a huge amount of waste. So please bear this in mind. Mr. Gary Fan, the 15th round, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I have a question about environmental pollution near landfills, odor, noise, and also leachate dripping from RCVs, and also dust emission. This is not just about the use of landfills. These are secondary pollution, and we have received complaints from RCV drivers, and the administration has failed to answer me directly about the pollution cost in the cost of RCVs traveling to landfills. The administration did not give us a concrete reply, and you only said that 18 joint operations were carried out, including the police and the FHD, and this is up to the beginning of 2014. But in the whole of 2013, for all the joint operations and raids conducted, how many cases did you prosecute? I'm not only talking about the lump sum figure, about all the overloading incidents and leakage of leachate, etc. I want some figures. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gary Fan. We did provide these figures to LegCo. Maybe I'll recap very briefly. That's the figures from January to April. Well, in fact, we gave the figures from August 2013 to September 2014. We intercepted 190 such vehicles, and 95 of the vehicles had to do with the leakage of leachate, and 102 vehicles did not have a full enclosure of the compartment. So that's the end of your answer. Right, Mr. Gary Fan, 16th round, 2 minutes. I'd like to follow up on it. Why is it that in starting from August 2013, only at that time did you start to have joint operations? The administration at the EA panel, when the order was struck down, made such decision. I understand that these joint operations should be done on a sustainable basis, not just starting from August 2013. Have you made any comparisons in terms of effectiveness? Have things improved recently? This will be crucial in lobbying support from the residents regarding your landfill extension proposal. This will be an important indicator. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Fan. According to the latest figures, the Joint Prosecution operation in September 2014, we saw some improvements. Any figures for comparison? What is meant by improvements? And what is the period of time involved? How was the comparison made, starting from which year to which year? Mr. Lau. Those are the figures that we have seen in September. If you want an analysis from August 2013 to September 2014, we can give you afterwards. What about the period before that? Does it show by comparison that this is a declining trend? We do have data before 2013, but in August 2013 we stepped up our effort. Before that we did not have such regular or frequent operations. That means before August 2013 the FHD and the police acted on their own. They did not have joint operations. Well, perhaps the operations were not as frequent as now, but I can give you this information later. Dr. Fernando Zhang, the 13th round, 2 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Chen just now mentioned about the vehicle trips going to landfills and fill banks. That's around 13 to 1400 trips per day. Now, I'm looking at para 17A of your paper. You said that if the extension proposal is announced, you will announce the effective date by destination of the destination by notice in the Gazette. By then, not only will the older concern be removed, the number of vehicle trips going to the sent landfill will also drop from about 1,000 to about 500 daily. 500 trips. That's a duplication of the 13 to 1400 trips you mentioned, or do you mean 500 on top of the 13 to 1400, or is it a reduction from the 13 to 1400 trips? Thank you for your question. In fact, for the 13 to 1400 trips, that's the figure coming from the CEDD for vehicles traveling to fill banks. For paragraph 17A, we're talking about vehicles going to landfills. Going to the sent landfill. So that's the addition of the two sums, the two figures, and that's a concern because it is not a small figure. Construction waste very often causes concerns over air quality. One of the concerns is PM 2.5, and an organization alleges that you're being selective in announcing the PM 2.5 figures. You only measured the part near the fire station in Daichek. In fact, Dr. Fernando Zhang, you've asked this question for a number of times before, and they have answered you. Next, Mr. Frederick Fong. The 16th round. Air pollution affects human health after breathing in PM 2.5. I don't know if the Secretary knows that for Cheung Kwan O Hospital, the patients, the waiting list for ENT, ear, nose, throat specialist is the longest. Have you considered the relationship between such ENT conditions and PM 2.5? If no such study has been conducted, what is the reason? Mr. Fong, I'd like to know the relevance of your question to this funding proposal. If ENT conditions have to be related to PM 2.5, then a lot of other matters can be linked to PM 2.5. What is the relevance to the landfill itself? I'm not wasting your time. I have the responsibility of checking your question. Well, you just don't understand me. We all along say the PM 2.5 affects public health. I just now asked about the monitoring station to be set up, and I asked whether the monitoring station could be set up near the landfill. I am very concerned about this because PM 2.5 affects our health. Now, Mr. Fong, my question is, what's the connection between PM 2.5 ENT patients in Cheung Kwan O? Because after breathing in PM 2.5, your ear, nose, throat, your respiratory system is most likely to be affected. Well, in fact, as mentioned last time, PM 2.5 is mostly generated from car emission. We can reduce, well, by extending the landfill, we can reduce the vehicle trips by half. So in theory, it should improve the situation about PM 2.5. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Well, I never asked any question about PM 2.5. Perhaps you have mixed up between me and another member. Chairman, well, I just said that other members already asked a lot of questions about PM 2.5. Well, an organization said that you were being selective in announcing the data. You only announced the figure concerning the Daichek fire station. However, for the other location, the readings for PM 2.5 is much higher. The reading is almost 5 times more than other areas of Hong Kong. So my question is, are the figures correct? The organization alleges you of only announcing the good results and hiding the bad ones. Well, for TAICHEC's readings and other or the data in other air quality monitoring stations, we actually have showed all the figures in the same chart, so you can make a comparison. About the one in Shackock Road, perhaps in the community they use handheld device, which is quite different from our equipment. And according to international organizations, prolonged exposure to PM 2.5 would affect humans' health. So the indicator is to make an annual assessment of intake of PM 2.5 annually. If you use a handheld device, then you can just have a snapshot of the reading or 15-minute average, and this cannot be representative of the air quality. Next, Mr. Gary Fenn, 2 minutes. Now, I'd like to ask about environmental protection in the surrounding arising from the RCVs traveling there. Well, you say you try to transport waste by sea instead of relying solely on RCVs. In August, in answering the Council's question on how to further explore the transport of waste by sea, you said that according to the timetable you set down, even by 2015-16 on a daily basis, you could only reduce the vehicle trips by 200. Now, every day there are 1,300 to 1,400 trips to Pecuniary Landfill. Why is the percentage so low? Are there difficulties behind for you to transport more waste by sea instead of relying on one-pole road? This question has been asked many times, Mr. Gary Fan, and it has been answered many times. In fact, for public fill banks, the operation is totally unrelated to the landfill extension proposal. Mr. Gary Fan, no follow-up? Yes. What about the new RTS with the use of barges? It's set to be commissioned in the end of 2014. So, any update about the Kai-Tak barge RTS? As I said just now, it has commenced operation since September, and we have been able to reduce the vehicle trips by 100. So, does it mean there will be a further reduction of 100? Yes, that's the plan. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 11th round, 2 minutes. Thank you. Chairman, a question on the incinerator. There won't be any separation of waste, but overseas experience tells us that at least you should separate the waste, the combustible waste to incombustible ones. Is this a need? Can you tell us? If it's not necessary, can you tell us what is meant by non-combustible waste as classified in other jurisdictions? Well, Secretary, for glass, for pottery shirts, they are not combustibles. Now we have the producer responsibility scheme, and we hope to implement the scheme as soon as possible, so as to reduce the waste to be disposed of by the incinerator. But such waste won't affect our health. It would only affect the efficiency of incineration. So as the percentage of such waste is small, we will not give this top priority. I think the public would also like to know this, because we don't have waste separation or classification, unlike other countries which have legislative arrangements for non-combustible waste. So, apart from non-combustible waste you mentioned, are there other dangerous items such that at least we should have a simple classification mechanism? You talk about manual picking, but in the long term, a brief reply, please. Well, dangerous goods, inflammables, they are controlled under the regulation. As for chemical waste, they come under another piece of legislation. So they cannot be disposed of casually. Members, I'd like to say that we have had 16 hours of meetings in relation to these 4 papers. Over 30 members have spoken. A number of members have asked questions for more than 10 times, some up to 17 times. On many occasions, I already reminded members that they were repeating their questions. Although I would encourage members to ask questions at the same time as chairman, I would also need to ensure the smooth conduct and efficient conduct of meetings. So do make good use of your time. We have about half an hour left. I hope that after today's meeting, members can complete the Q&A session so that we can proceed with Rule 37A procedure. I ask for members' cooperation. Next, Mr. Albert Chan, 5th round, 2 minutes. Well, if some have asked us for 17 rounds, and I have still 12 rounds to go. Mr. Albert Chan, you have been sitting here for the whole evening already. I don't have the responsibility of allowing everybody to ask or not ask questions simply because somebody has asked 17 times. But if you have a question, press your button. But I just want to remind you not to repeat your question and not to take up time not asking questions. I never repeat my questions. I ask questions not asked by other members. And Secretary never answered. Chairman, to follow up on the point I made, my assistant just reminded me that I cited the figures with the wrong unit about sulfur dioxide and its impact on human health. This impact is more severe than carbon dioxide. I don't know whether senior government officials are just being nice. They never pointed out my mistake, or were they just dozing off and had no idea what I was talking about? The report is so important. It's published by you with the emission of 1,447 tons of sulfur dioxide. The situation is very grave. And about the incinerator across the border, the sulfur dioxide generated is far less. The phase 2 of the Laohu Keng has commenced operation for more than a year. They generate only 250 tons of sulfur dioxide, but for us it's 1,447. This is your 5th round. 2 minutes have been given to you. For the first 2 rounds, 4 minutes. For the 3rd round, 3 minutes, and then starting from the 4th round, 2 minutes. Are you going to press the button and ask again? All right, the 6th round. Who would like to take his question? Chairman, let me take the question about the Mr. Chan's question. I don't know where the figure of 250 tons come from, so I cannot comment on that. I can only say that our incineration technology reaches the EU standard and one of the most stringent standards. So I cannot see how we are faring worse than our counterpart. This is the brief in relation to the phase 2 of the Laohu incinerator in Shenzhen. This was published on the 26th of April 2013. And you are the experts. At the neighboring place, the development is so similar to ours. So don't ask me where I dig up this information. They also have this chart. They only emit 1/6 of our total emission. Secretary, are you awake? Please ask your colleague or do something yourself. They emit 250, we emit 1,447 tons. Why is there such a big difference?
Let me supplement. We adopt the maximum standards of the EU. They are just emitting 250 tons of sulfur dioxide. How come that we emit so much more? If you say that you don't know, go back and do your homework and give me an answer later. Now we produce sulfur dioxide, and that will create acid rain, and then that does a lot of damage to the environment. We have the same capacity of 3,000 tons of waste. How come that we are producing 6 times more sulfur dioxide than Shenzhen? Well, this is a plant in Bao'an next to us. Well, the plant is up and running now. Why don't you go and take a look? Well, I get infuriated. Well, don't you want the secretary to answer you, Mr. Chen? Well, let's be clear. There are 2 figures here. One is the emission maximum of the international standards. If you go to Singapore, Australia, well, they use the same standards for planning their plants. Now, there are practical reasons why there is a difference between the 2 plants. Well, we don't have to do a direct comparison. 7th round, Mr. Albert Chen. Why do we have to compare? Because you are producing 6 times more sulfur dioxide, and that damages our environment and endangers our health. Now, the Shenzhen plant is already up and running, and this is quoted from your consultant's report. You said that this is a maximum level, and you said that well, we will not go up to as much as 1,447 tons. Well, give me a reason why you will be producing less than that amount. You may say that you will be just producing 250 tons, just like Laohu in Shenzhen. Well, you have to give me the reason. Well, if you don't know the answer, please go back and study and give me a more specific answer. Well, next week we may vote on the matter, so I'll give you a 1 week's time and give me a reply in a paper, please. For the EIA, that will cover the maximum allowable standards for different pollutants, and these standards are international standards, and every jurisdiction uses those standards for their planning purposes. I understand all these. But then when the EIA report is completed, we already have a plant next to us, adjacent to us, and it's been up and running for over 1 year. So can't we take reference from them to see how we can reduce the volume of sulfur dioxide to be produced in Hong Kong? This is the responsible approach to dealing with things. Just don't quote the maximum levels. Well, there is this plant which is producing 1/6 of what we produce. Can we do a better job? Well, when we do planning, we should use some international standards. And as to the actual emission amount, then that would depend on the actual operation. I don't see how that is relevant to our discussion today. Next one. Mr. Albert Chen, 8th round. Secretary, if you said that this is irrelevant, I think you are not just burying your head in the sand. You are sacrificing Hong Kong people's well-being, their health, and our reputation. And this other plant is already operating. But then the one you're planning, well, is worse off. And you don't have the intention to do a better job, and you have the least intention to improve things, well, the kind of attitude that you are having is grossly unacceptable. Well, please answer me. Can you adopt a more proactive approach? I would not say that the emission from Shekuchao will be worse off than the Shenzhen plant. Let me cite this example. Okay, I'm not talking about dioxin. I'm just talking about sulfur dioxide. Well, we've got the figures here. Well, let me quote the example of dioxin. The world standards is 0.001, less than 0.001. Can you answer the question related to sulfur dioxide? Please give him the time. I'm talking about an apple, and he's replying me in with an orange. I want him to answer on the question on sulfur dioxide, not dioxin. Well, please don't talk nonsense, Mr. L. We would adopt the latest international standards, and those are adopted by overseas jurisdiction and the mainland, and so on and so forth. We would use the latest technology to minimize the emission of sulfur dioxide. Well, the question is, what you put into the incinerator, and then that will come up. And that will result in the kind of emission that will be resulted. Now, there is a separation of source in other places. But the question is now that the administration is not doing nothing in terms of the source of waste. Ms. Emily Lau and others have asked questions about what they are doing in terms of separation of waste at source. And overseas jurisdictions, there will be separation of a source of waste before it is taken to the incinerator. But you haven't been able to give us a reply, so that's why we've come up with this 1,447 tons of sulfur dioxide emission. So if you try to be on a par with others, you must have separation of waste at source before you take the waste to the incinerator. But then you don't seem to have such a plan, and you're just repeating answers. And Mr. Al is always talking about EU standards. You give the same answer to our questions, and you're not facing up to the problem. And that is, Hong Kong is lagging so much behind in our waste disposal compared to other countries, and we are lagging behind, and we are lagging behind Shenzhen's incinerator. Well, Shenzhen is just next to us, and the electrical members did go on a duty visit earlier, and that at that time we visited the phase 1 of the project. But now the phase 2 of the project has already operated for over 1 year. So these are the issues that we should be clear about. Now, the DAB members always visit the mainland, so why don't you ask the administration to do a better job than the mainland? Well, we are lagging behind the mainland in all aspects, including waste disposal. Well, you should be ashamed of yourself. Mr. Yip Kok Kim, first round, 4 minutes. Well, I really can't put up with what Mr. Albert Chen said. Well, he is repeating the questions all the time, and the officials have already answered him. And he should let the officials answer. Secretary, please give him a reply. Well, planning standards are sometimes different, or often different from the actual emission. If we go to visit the factories in Sweden or Japan, there is always a difference in the figures, the planning figures and the actual emission figures. Now, the recycling rate in Hong Kong is good, 40%. In Sweden is 50%. But then 10% of those is food waste. So 10 years ago, well, it was 40% for Sweden as well. So it's more or less like what we are having today in Hong Kong. And in Singapore, Sweden, Macau, UK, France, the recycling rate is almost the same. And their incinerators have been up and running for over, say, 10 to 20 years. And according to the blueprint, we will be increasing our recycling rate so that more waste can be recycled. But then that has nothing to do with emission level. Next one, Mr. Albert Chan, 10th round, 2 minutes. This is the kind of quality of the DAB members. Have they really answered your question? Now, what I'm talking about is this incinerator, which is up and running in Shenzhen, having a capacity of 3,000 tons. Well, they are producing 1/6 of the sulfur dioxide of what we are producing. Well, they haven't been able to answer that question. So you are accepting that answer. And we are building this incinerator at a cost 10 times than that of the Shenzhen, and we are having the same capacity. And you have to convince the public and electrical members and why you think that the actual emission will be lower than the planned emission. You have to give us an actual a good explanation as to why you think that after the plant or the incineration is commissioned, that the sulfur dioxide that we generate will be the same, or it will be on a par or in level the same as the Laohu Keng plant. The same technology in emission reduction will be used by both the Hong Kong plant and the Shenzhen plant. So there's no reason why we should be faring worse than the Shenzhen plant. Well, are you saying that Le Wuhan plant gives us some mistaken figures? No, what I'm saying is that we would be adopting the most effective technology to minimize emission levels. This is the kind of technology adopted in Europe as well. Mr. Yip Kwok Him. Second round, 3 minutes. Well, Mr. Albert Yip never gets it. Well, this is a kind of quality of people power members. Well, we are adopting the EU standards in our planning, in building the incinerator. I think that's very clear. I don't know much about the Shenzhen plant. I would not make a comparison, therefore. But then, if we are designing the incinerator based on EU standards, then we will be, say, be building it based on international standards. And I think he is being illogical, and you just don't believe in the administration's answer. I think you are just trying to store things. Well, for whoever who has listened to his remarks, and they would find his remarks very unreasonable. Mr. Raymond Chan, 10th round, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chan cited the example of Laohu Keng plant. What the government should do first is to try to ascertain whether the figures are correct, i.e. whether they are just emitting 1/6 the sulfur dioxide of the plant in Hong Kong. And you said that we are adopting the best technology, and it's impossible for Shenzhen to adopt even better technologies. Well, if that is the case, then it's maybe the case that the Shenzhen plant is fabricating the figures. Now, the secretary said that the comparison can't be made between the two plants, but I don't see why. Because the two plants are adopting the same technology. And then we have to look at what kind of waste they are incinerating to see why there is this difference. I've got 1 minute left. I want to raise this question. there are suggestions that the three landfills and one incinerator projects can be downsized or implemented in phases. Now, if the Jiangguan O project can't be passed, would you consider sort of downsizing the other two projects or implementing them in phases? As I answered last time, the funding application for the Tuen Mun project is just for a consultancy project. And so it will be the case that the other two landfills and one incinerator project will go ahead first. And then after we've got the consultancy study report for Tuen Mun, then we will look at whether we'll look in detail the expansion size in Tuen Mun. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, 11th round, 2 minutes. You are adopting the EU standards in building the incinerator, but are you adopting the EU standards in separating the waste first before incineration? If you incinerate different materials, and you get different results. Well, you don't seem to get it, DAB. So would you be selecting the type of waste to be incinerated? You said no. So are you alleging that the Shenzhen plant is just fabricating the figures? Now, I know a lot of people in Shenzhen. Now, if you do that, well, then you will end up like James 10. You are insulting the mainland, our motherland. Are you alleging that they are fabricating the figures? Are you saying that they get bribes? I know a lot of NPC delegates. Is it the case that you don't want to be NPC members anymore? Are you trying to deliberately insulting Lau Kukang plant? Well, so or another way of doing it is you send some materials back to Lau Kukang for incineration, and you get what you want to burn to incinerate in Hong Kong. Secretary. Incinerators in different parts of the world have different emission levels, and they should be below EU standards. Now, the recycling rate in Hong Kong is 40%, and that is on a par with, say, France. So please don't get that mixed up with our emission level. Mr. Albert Chan, 11th round. Well, we are all very clear about the AB stance. They trust whatever the administration says. Now, XRL, we've already spent $66.9 billion, but then ultimately we will end up with a bill of over $100 billion. And that has to do with the fact that back then, when we scrutinized the project, that was the way DAB acted. They don't have independent thinking. They just trust and believe in whatever the government says. Well, you go to visits to the mainland all the time. Why don't you motto or learn from the mainland experience and then advise the government accordingly? Well, you should, because you are loyalists, well, just tell the government not to adopt EU standards, but rather the standards in Lau Kukang. Now you are colluding with foreign forces because you are saying that you would adopt EU standards. Shouldn't you be asking the government to adopt the mainland standards? Now I'll teach you how to love the country. You said you claim to be loyalists, patriots, but in fact or in reality, you are just, leaning towards the foreign powers. And the mainland officials are sending off their children to study overseas. Xi Jinping said that during his tenure, and he would deal with corrupt officials. And well, the first one that the government should tackle is really C.Y. Lam. Well, members, we have to end the meeting by 7:25 p.m.
On my list, 5 members have pressed the button wishing to speak. 5 members would like to speak. After the 5 have spoken, I would wind up the discussion. I'll try my best to let you speak. For those who have spoken yet, I'll give you the floor first, Mr. Tam Yu Chung. So I'll read out the names, those 5 names. Please do not speak while I'm speaking. Albert Chen. But why didn't you stop Leung Sing? Leung Sing talked about somebody having spouse and children in Canada. I asked him who, and he couldn't give an answer. If you continue, it's difficult to handle the meeting. Please respect me. There are 5 names. Albert Chen, and Leung Kwok Hong, if you continue to speak while I'm speaking, I will ask you to leave. 5 members' names are on my list. They have raised their hands. I would like to draw a line here. Tam Yu Chung, speaking for the first or rather second time. And then Leung Kwok Hong, the 12th time. Gary Fan. Frederick Fung, the 17th time. Gary Fan, the 18th time. Tam Yu Chung, you've got 4 minutes. I won't use 4 minutes. I'll just use 1 minute. I can't put up with it anymore. Albert Chen, you haven't got anything else to speak, to talk about, and so just you take it out on the DAB, so I have to speak. Kenneth Chen, I've drawn a line. I'm sorry. Just now I looked around and to see how many members were present, and we have to adjourn the meeting. Gary Fan, you're talking about today's meeting? I have another 10 rounds of questions. You won't. I've already said that it's already adequate. After today's meeting, we will close it, and then at the next meeting, we are going to move on to 37A motions. Even if you have further questions, I won't allow you to ask further questions. I think many questions are repetitive. This is my decision. Gary Fan, Tam Yu Chung. You finish? Next. Kenneth Chen. Fernando Zhang. Point of order. Please cite the rules of procedure to say that we can no longer have further questions. Well, about half an hour ago, I spoke to you. Being the chair of the Finance Committee, I have the duty, and I need to properly and reasonably conduct the meeting, make sure that we make good use of the time. Otherwise, the meeting will just drag on, and then the FC cannot discharge our duties properly. Half an hour ago, I already told colleagues that you should make good use of the time and continue with the discussion. And at the close of today's meeting, I would wind up today's discussion. Kenneth Chen, I think you were trying to raise a point of order, right? Fernando Zhang hasn't finished. I'll let him finish. Mr. Chairman, we have also got a duty to ask for the sake of clarity. Yes, I understand your duty. I've already told you that I'm the chair of the FC. Now, members have got 10 times, 26 minutes, and then others have also used 40 minutes. It is not true that you haven't got sufficient time. There is already sufficient time. And at today's meetings, In most cases, for the questions asked by members and for the replies given by the administration, we have got repetitions after repetitions. I've already made a decision. I've already made a ruling. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Half an hour ago, I've already given notice. I've already told you that I planned to do so. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Well, a few days ago, I asked around. No one made such a suggestion. Others had some feedback, while some others didn't. Now today, you have been repeating your questions in many cases. I've already promised to give the floor to 4 more members. For Wendt, we haven't got even 10% of the time. Gary Fan, you have already asked questions for 17 times, and you have been repeating most of your questions. Had you asked your questions earlier, you would have got the chance to do so. I've already ruled on it. Gary Fan, it's no longer your time to speak. Next, Leung Kwok Hong, 2 minutes. Sorry, Gary Fan, I've already told you it's not your time to speak. Do you know how much of the time has been given to Wendt? Gary Fan, you had 17 rounds of questions, and yet you decided not to ask a question about West New Territories. It isn't something I can help you. I've only got the duty to rule, to see how the meeting is conducted. There's no need for me to argue with you. Please don't speak. Otherwise, I have to send you out. If you continue to speak, I have to send you out. Mr. Gary Fan, please leave. I haven't asked about West NT Landfill. I've already made a decision. You have had 18 rounds. I won't engage with you anymore. I still have this meeting to conduct. If you continue to speak, I've asked you not to speak. If you continue, I have to have you sent out. Gary Fan, I've already ordered you to leave. Please leave. You can protest, but please leave. If you don't, if you continue to speak, interrupting the meeting, then I'll ask the clerk to ask you to leave. Clerk, please ask Gary Fan to leave. Fernando Cheung, please resume your seat. Fernando Cheung, please go back to your seat. I have to conduct the meeting. Gary Fan, please leave. Our clerk. Fernando Cheung, please go back to your seat. Otherwise, you will be asked to leave as well. I have this duty. Let me say this to you. I have the duty to balance the right between the right of members to speak and to conduct the meeting orderly, in an orderly way. Gary Fan, please don't remain here. Clerk, please ask him to leave. Clerk, please enforce it.
我會處理埋。
I will finish with what I have to do today. Mr. Gary Fan, please leave. Clerk, please enforce my order. Mr. Albert Chan, please resume your seat. Why didn't you stop him when he spoke? Please go back to your seat. Are they speaking? It's you who are speaking. Mr. Albert Chan, please sit down. Please go back to your seat and sit down. I will extend the meeting by 10 minutes until the names of members whose names I've read out. Please go back to your seat and sit down. I have already called Frederick Fung, Fernando Zhang, Gary Fan, and Leung Kwok Hong. Clerk, please make a record of it. At our next meeting, the four of them will speak. I've already drawn a line. I'm sorry about that. Kenneth Chan, what do you want to say? Just now, the reason you gave was that many members have spoken for many times. I think if you ask the clerk, then you will be clear. I've been careful and rational in dealing with this incinerators issue. The Sen asked me to look up the information. I've done the homework and I'm thinking about it. So just now when you made an announcement, I think the more reasonable way is that you should have written to all the members of the FC telling us about the plan, drawing a line or ending the filibustering. This is most unfair to me. I have to put it on record that I protest against you. Please withdraw your order so that at the next meeting, for those who haven't got the opportunity to hear about your announcement about ending the discussion today, they have the opportunity to come back again next time so as to finish with all the questions that they want to ask. I think at the meeting yesterday, the PAC has already said that we have to control the way that public money is spent. Our meeting is going to end. I've already said that the 5 members whose names I've read out will be allowed to speak next time in the order that I have told you. And after that, we will move on to 37A. And we will inform members that when we deal with 37A motions next time, and I've noted that maybe you would like to move motions under 37A because without notice you may move a motion, and also at the meeting you may also hand in a motion in writing. If you want to draft a motion on the spot, I will exercise discretion, but then to be fair and to conduct the meeting properly, I must make sure that we have got sufficient time to vet whether the motion is related to the agenda items, and then I can also discuss with you how to handle the motions received. Therefore, for those members who would like to move motions, please, before 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 24th of November, Monday next week, notify us of the motions that you're going to move. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.